With the addition of the Cold War guns coming into Warzone, we may finally have guns that can rival the top tier spots in each category. And in today's video, I wanted to tackle the Titan itself, the HDR. Ah yes, the notepad of knowledge. So it turns out there are a ton of websites with a ton of conflicting numbers from any type of website, any type of content creator, YouTube. It's plagued with mines of bad data. So I went to truegamedata.com. I like going there because the people there do a thorough investigation of the numbers, and then I like to cross-reference those with YouTubers, Exclusive Ace, Drifter, JGod, you know, the big names in all the industry, and I compile everything I can find for everything that we need for this video. So I went with the LW3 against the HDR because in the game of Warzone itself, if you look at the statistics, the LW3 actually has more range. Now I put that in quotations because I don't think that's necessarily true with the game data that we're finding here, but it's just what it goes off of. However, I went also with the HDR mono suppressor and the 26.9 barrel because it increases the bullet velocity, so I have that listed here as well. We'll go over that. And the LW3 being from Cold War is special, as that the health in Cold War is increased for everybody there. So the LW3 actually has increased damage. Now I'm not 100% for sure because it's really hard to test with having private lobbies and stuff. For Warzone, you need 50 people to start. It's really hard to test the damage itself. However, I have a bunch of clips of me shooting people that I know have not been touched, and they have at least 2 things of armor. And it's a one shot to the chest. So I listed the damage that I could find from Cold War and all the statistics that go along with it. I know a lot of other guns have different stat changes. I know JGod went over that, and some other ones about the MP5 and the M4, even different recoil patterns. However, I think the sniper rifles, at least the LW3, remains untouched. All right, now that that nothingness is out of the way, let's get into the hardcore stats. Now the HDR is going to do a damage model of 112 to 0 to 100 meters, and anywhere out of that is going to be about 101 to 102 damage. Now the LW3 coming from Cold War has a different damage model altogether, and if I'm honest with you guys, I think they haven't modified it to the community meta or the game mechanics itself for Warzone. And the biggest thing I have for this is I have a bunch of clips that I'm shooting people in the chest with the Tiger Team barrel, which does 200 damage, and it's a complete one shot. Now you have to remember, the Tiger Team is doing 200 damage. When you're coming out of the sky or fresh out of a gulag or whatever, you have 2 plates of armor, which means you're going to have about 200 HP. So the LW is completely demolishing these guys in one shot, and these aren't even to the head, which leads me to believe that the damage models that we have from Cold War, at least for the snipers, are exactly the same. So saying all this, I think everything else that I can get from the Cold War perspective of the LW3 is going to match exactly with whatever is coming into Warzone, at least for now. So I went in through the HDR. You guys know this. We have a round per minute of 32 against the LW3 of 47. Now remember, the Tiger barrel you can put on the LW is going to bring that up to 57, which is, I mean, noticeable. It's not too great, but it's noticeable. Going in through the ADS speeds, the HDR is at a 604 millisecond and the LW3 is at 650. Now they received a huge nerf here a couple months ago in Cold War where the sniper rifles really got toned down. Before, the Pellington, for example, was hitting about 320 milliseconds. I think now, even with all the ADS attachments, it's still hitting around 400 to 500 milliseconds. So it definitely got a nerf. I don't know if they're going to buff that here. I don't expect a buff anywhere soon if it's still going to hit for 200 damage, but you know, it is what it is. The reload time is flat with 3 seconds for the LW, assuming you're not using any other attachments, and the HDR is coming in at 319. The big thing here is the HDR can get a speed buff to the reload speed using one of the perks in the game. The LW3 cannot do that without sacrificing ADS time, as that's just how the Cold War mechanics are. Now, for the movement speed, this was kind of hard to figure out, but the HDR is still coming in at 428 meters per second, and the LW3 is coming in at 459 meters per second. Now, through my testing for bullet velocity, I thought the guns actually fell off around the same distance, but doing some digging and some practicing, the HDR basic will have a bullet velocity of 750 milliseconds. Now with the mono suppressor and the 26.9 barrel, that goes all the way up to 1207, almost 1208, which is why when people say it's hit scan, it's because there is virtually no bullet drop. Now with the LW3, it has 550, making it more of a mid-range right out of the gate, and 825 with the Tiger. You can also equip the 29.1, which is actually a barrel above that in the category, which will take it up to 963 milliseconds. So there's that. Now, I'm not one to just look at the news and take it all in, so I did some investigation myself between ADS speed, sway, reload, fire rate, movement speed, and anything else that I could possibly test, bullet velocity and range, just to see if we got everything at least somewhat close to what the stats are that we're getting from both sides of the game. As this is an integration, I didn't want to just leave it up to chance that one of these may be wrong, and I'm giving you guys the wrong information. So the first thing and easiest thing to test out is ADS sway. Now keep a note I am crouched in this video, but it really doesn't matter as the LW3 has a ton of sway and the HDR virtually wipes it off the map, having virtually none. You can see the difference side by side. It is insane. The HDR definitely coming out the clear winner here. When it comes to ADS speed, I don't have all the math mumbo jumbo, and I work with Adobe Pro, which is a little bit harder than Vegas or some of the others to track milliseconds to frames. Now in Warzone and other places it's been at 60 FPS, one frame is equal to about 16.6 milliseconds. And although I can't really say if that's for sure what's going on between these two clips, I can absolutely tell you that the HDR aimed in about 3 to 4 frames faster when I did my test, which definitely tells me that at least on paper, the HDR does ADS faster, and so at least I'm happy to report that's true. Moving on, the next thing I tested was movement speed. So the first thing I did was a tactical sprint, and I wanted to see how far I could get with each gun using just the tactical sprint, and they were pretty much identical. So after that, I went with movement speed itself, just doing a basic sprint. I put a marker down, set a timer for 30 seconds, and seeing how far I could get with each gun. And yeah, the LW3 is still sporting that higher movement speed. As you can see, it had 180, where the HDR fell at 160. So yeah, the LW3 is still king in the movement side. Going off of the fire rate, yeah, it seems that the LW3 still sports that faster fire rate. This I can track. And even with the Tiger Barrel, which increases the fire rate all the way up to 57, it is absolutely noticeable. Now, looking at it side by side, it may be hard to tell, but it is definitely something you're going to have to look at in game. But the LW3 is coming out ahead here with the increased fire rate. So the next thing that I tested was a visual test of the bullet velocity, which really doesn't amount to much because it's really hard to tell the difference between 500 and 600. So I tried to go to the highest spot that I could find. Of course, I wanted to do prison or downtown, but the people in the lobby just weren't having it. So I tried to go to the same spot, hold my breath, and aim at the exact same spot on the map so that I could see if there was any visual drop off for the bullets. Now, I couldn't really find anything. If anything, the HDR did seem like it held its breath a little longer going before it hit the target, but I'll just play the clips. I mean, you guys just tell me what you think down in the comment section below. So for now, the verdict to me looks like the HDR is still going to be the king for the long range engagements. Having great bullet velocity, good magnification for the variable zoom, and a good damage profile, it's still going to remain on top. One thing I forgot to mention, speaking of the variable zoom, the HDR and a lot of the Warzone guns have a set of 2, going from 5 to 12, 6 to 12, or something like that. Whereas a lot of the Cold War guns and the variable zooms that they have go from 1 to something, and so you have to actually press a button on your controller or press a keybind on your computer, your mouse, every single time. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 10 or 20. This takes a lot more time, and it's not practical zooming all the way in and then trying to zoom all the way out. You may lose your target. It just takes a lot more time. So I would definitely give that edge as well to the HDR. However, I think there is something to be said about the increased damage profile that these Cold War guns are going to bring in. I can't wait to test out the Barrett and the Pellington and see exactly what they're bringing to the table. So do not be afraid to test out the LW. I'm definitely having fun using it, but I just wanted to give you guys my opinion and lay out all the statistics that I could. So that's it, guys. Like the video if you learned something, or if you liked the video, yell at me down in the comments section below if you didn't like it, and subscribe so you can do either or in the future and see more of my sexy face in the future. All right, guys, I love you. Peace.
¿Quién le espero que participe?